Helmut Marko has recently spoken about the possibility of seeing Verstappen depart Red Bull before the new regulations kick in 2026, and it does look like a realistic option for the three-time world champion, considering the drop of performance that's happened in Red Bull in the past couple of months. Given the fact that the Dutchman wasn't listened to when he pointed towards the primary stability issues of the car, Marko's statements make a lot of sense right now, and with the rise of Aston Martin's technical department, as well as Honda's arrival from 2026 onwards, can this be the next destination for Verstappen and his loyal companion? It's safe to say that one of the biggest downfalls in Formula One recently is Red Bull, and while many would find it surprising, this isn't the take of Max Verstappen and his father Jos. Max constantly stated that these issues were persisting ever since Miami, but the fact that he was able to win a couple of races that he wasn't really supposed to didn't really push the team to thinking about a narrative in which they'd be caught in both of the championships. This is something that Marko believes will play a key factor when it comes to Verstappen's future, because it's not just the competitiveness that's gone. The team has played some pretty dirty games that he wasn't involved in, such as lying about Ricciardo being his teammate from Zandvoort onwards, as well as not listening to his input about the car's flaws and relying purely on his talent. Elaborating on the situation, the veteran Austrian said, "Next year, Verstappen will drive for Red Bull Racing, but 2026? That is so far away. Now our full focus is on the 2024 World Championship." Although not many believed that Verstappen would find himself threatened in the Drivers' Championship with a 78-point lead before the second half of the season, the Dutchman has lost 16 points to Norris in just 2 races, and it could have been a lot more had the strategy of McLaren played off better in Monza. Regardless, the next 2 races are ones in which many expect that the dominance of the MCL 38 will repeat itself, and Verstappen will lose a huge chunk of his lead, as Red Bull's downfall in the Constructors' Championship is now as clear as the sky. Verstappen himself admitted that with the current version of the car, they won't be able to win any race until the end of the season, while Marko said that the first signs of competitiveness should come around Austin, which is in October. Therefore, the meeting that Red Bull will hold among themselves after the Singapore GP is one that will definitely have the question of Max's future being answered sooner rather than later. But the verdict that Max has for the team as well as the car is far from positive. And despite all of his energy being focused on fixing the car's balance, there comes a time when you are simply hurt by the fact that nobody is listening to what you're saying to the extent they should. Elaborating on the next couple of races, as well as the car's balance being the primary issue of the team, Verstappen said, "I think at the moment on most tracks our main issue is the balance. Ride can be improved on every single track naturally, but on the street circuits that really comes out more. At the moment, we are not the fastest car even on a normal track, so I don't expect Singapore to suddenly then be fantastic. It's not going to swap around in Singapore for us." Another very important thing is that Marko has spoken about the key departures from Red Bull, and while he didn't want to admit that Newey's one might have hurt more than the others, the veteran Austrian was adamant that the team is vastly affected by this massive phenomenon of experienced engineers and high-profile members leaving the team. It does seem like the departure of Newey being announced around Miami and the downfall of Red Bull starting more or less at the same period is something that is too big of a coincidence to be accepted as such. And when talking about this, Marko said, "It is obvious that the internal drama in the team did not help, but ultimately it has nothing to do with our technical problems. Rather, it's the departure of important people. If certain employees want to leave and get a good offer or see a new opportunity, they take advantage of it. In Austin, we have to show that we have managed the turnaround." Jos Verstappen hasn't been very shy to comment on the entire situation either, as the father of the 3-time world champion stated, "Max already indicated at the beginning of the season that the balance was not right. That was not brought out because you try to keep that inside. But back then he was already complaining about the balance. Only they didn't really believe it, or they didn't see it back then, and now you're actually a little bit too late." The updates we introduced did not bring what people expected. That is why, as a team, you stand still a bit while other members are making really big steps. To stand still is to go backwards, especially in Formula 1. The coming period doesn't look positive either. The races follow each other in quick succession, and I don't think the team have really found a solution yet. This is something that would prove as a massive challenge because the team is more or less racing with specifications that they started the season with in Bahrain and further introduced until Imola, while the rest of the grid, McLaren and Mercedes, have managed to find a lot of performance out of their new parts. On the other hand, the departure of Honda from 2026 onwards and them joining forces with Aston Martin will also play a huge role as to where Verstappen would end up in the foreseeable future, because if we are to think about it, Mercedes might not be the favourite to sign the three-time world champion due to the current situation the Silver Arrows are in. 3 just doesn't go into 2, and with Antonelli being confirmed from 2025 onwards, the only way that the dream lineup would be made in Wolff's mind is if he gets rid of Russell, who is now going to be the expected leader and mentor in the team from the next season if Antonelli doesn't prove to be an absolute beast and outperform his teammate vastly. This could then open up the door for a shocking move for Verstappen in Russell's seat, which is kind of hard to understand and accept because the situation in Aston Martin is a bit more volatile and easier to understand when it comes to the driver's concept. Alonso is nearing the end of his career, while Lance Stroll is not the driver you'd bet your money to win a championship with the proper car. Therefore, Lawrence's choice might be easier to make than the one of Wolff. Even though the entire project revolves around Lance and he is the primary reason why his father is even in the sport in the first place, there might be some hard choices that the Canadian billionaire would have to make in the following period that would come at the expense of his son. Obviously, the restructure of the entire factory in Silverstone and bringing top-notch engineers like Enrico Cardile, Andy Cowell and more recently Adrian Newey is going to draw the attention of a driver like Verstappen, who might get persuaded by Newey thanks to the working environment that the engineer will create around himself. Unlike the role in Red Bull, which started to fade away slowly but surely to a consultant, it's believed that he'll have a great say into the engineer's placement and the structure of departments, which is something that Verstappen will really love. This could then pull his father and Helmut Marko to the team as well, and given the fact that the regulations are very tight right now and performance cannot just be found out of thin air, trying out a concept that was not very well accepted by Mercedes, Red Bull are definitely in big trouble when it comes to keeping their experienced staff as well as their superstar drivers. The fact that Perez said he and Max are now in the same boat with the car's issues goes to show that for the first time the team has made it public that the car is not where it needs to be, and when you are not competitive on tracks like Monza and Spa in terms of race pace, then you don't have a lot to bet around the high downforce tracks that are following, such as Singapore and Baku. The Singaporean GP is one in which Red Bull struggled massively and got both of its cars kicked out of Q2 even when the car was in its most dominant peak in 2023, and it was the only race that wasn't won by the RB19, so we can only imagine where the team will end up with the current struggles in a couple of weeks' time. With all this in mind, do you think that Max Verstappen will leave Red Bull sooner rather than later? And more importantly, do you think that it would be a right decision to make in his career, as the engineers haven't really listened to his feedback properly in a similar fashion to how the engineers in Mercedes didn't listen to Hamilton's output? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.